We're going to do something pretty intense.
Yeah.
We're going deep on Lex Fridman's interview with Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
Ooh.
It's a long one.
It is a long one.
Over 3 hours.
Yeah.
But trust me, it's worth it. We're talking about war leadership and what it means to have the weight of a nation on your shoulders.
It's really a fascinating interview because it's not just a dry recounting of, political talking points or events. It's very raw. It's emotional.
Yeah.
And you get a sense of Zelenskyy, the person, not just the president.
Totally. From the very beginning, I was struck by his decision to speak Ukrainian.
Yeah.
I mean, he could have done the interview in English.
Right.
And reached a much wider audience.
For sure.
But he stuck with Ukrainians.
Why do you think that was?
Well, I think it's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
It's about more than just language,
Yeah.
He even says at one point, the people who attack us, they speak Russian. It really highlights how deeply intertwined language and identity are in this conflict.
Right. Choosing Ukrainian is an act of defiance, you know? It's a way of saying, we are Ukrainian and we will not be erased.
Yeah. It's like drawing a line in the sand.
Exactly.
And speaking of history, I found his reflections on World War II to be really powerful.
Oh, yeah.
His grandfather fought in the war, saw some truly horrific things.
Yeah.
And Zelenskyy uses that family history to connect the dots between the rise of fascism then and what he sees happening now.
It's not just a historical parallel. It shapes his entire worldview. He talks about how the rise of Hitler wasn't just about Germany.
Right.
It was a global wave of hatred.
Yeah.
One race believing it was superior to others.
Mm-hmm.
He sees echoes of that in Putin's rhetoric and actions, which really raises the stakes of this conflict.
It's chilling, honestly.
Yeah.
You start to understand why he feels this is an existential fight.
Yeah.
Not just for Ukraine, but for democracy itself.
Absolutely.
And then he goes on to describe the morning of the invasion.
Oh, man.
The sounds of explosions, the disbelief.
I can't even imagine.
The sudden shift from being a father to his kids to being the father of a nation under attack.
Yeah.
It's just, wow.
I mean, imagine having to make that mental switch overnight.
Right.
Zelenskyy talks about how in that moment, your country is your family.
Yeah.
It just highlights the immense pressure he's under, the impossible choices he has to make every single day.
It's hard to even comprehend.
Yeah.
And yet he doesn't shy away from the complexities of the situation at all.
No, not at all.
He talks about his attempts to negotiate peace with Putin.
Mm-hmm.
Those early phone calls where he was trying to reason with him.
Yeah, he even shares a story about a call with Lukashenko, the Belarusian leader, who was basically apologizing for missiles being launched from his territory.
Oh, wow.
Lukashenko blames Putin, saying it wasn't his decision.
No.
It really shows you the tangled web of alliances and how difficult it is to get everyone on the same page when it comes to peace talks.
It's like a high-stakes poker game with everyone bluffing and trying to figure out each other's next move.
Exactly.
And then you have Zelenskyy in the middle of it all, trying to hold everything together.
It's incredible.
So how did those early peace talks go? Did they make any progress?
Well, he's very candid about how those attempts at dialogue broke down. How he came to realize that Putin wasn't negotiating in good faith.
Really?
Yeah. He even says at one point that Putin subsists and lives on being subjectivized. Instead of isolation, he is offered to step out into the light. He's darkness personified.
Whoa. That's intense. It sounds like he's completely lost faith in the idea that Putin can be reasoned with.
Yeah. It's a pretty bleak assessment.
So where does that leave him? What options does he have at that point?
Well, that's where the discussion of security guarantees comes in.
Okay.
Zelenskyy is very clear. He doesn't believe words are enough anymore.
Right.
He needs tangible, enforceable guarantees to protect Ukraine from future aggression.
So he's talking about things like NATO membership.
Exactly. But that's a whole other can of worms.
Right.
NATO membership is a very complex issue with a lot of geopolitical baggage.
For sure.
And Zelenskyy expresses frustration because he feels like Ukraine was betrayed by the Budapest Memorandum, the agreement where they gave up their nuclear weapons in exchange for security assurances.
And those assurances didn't exactly pan out.
No, not at all.
So what does he want instead?
He wants something more concrete.
Okay.
Legally binding commitments, not just vague promises that can be broken when it's convenient.
So he's basically saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice.
Shame on me.
Yeah.
Exactly. He's learned a hard lesson about the limits of diplomacy and the need for hard power in a world where someone like Putin can just decide to invade a sovereign nation.
Okay, so we've got Language is defiance, historical parallels.
Right.
A leader thrust into an impossible situation.
Yeah.
Failed peace talks. Yeah. And a desperate need for security. Where do we go from here?
Well, next, I think we have to try and understand the mind of the opponent.
Okay.
Zelenskyy offers some pretty fascinating insights into Putin's motivations.
Okay.
What drives him, what his endgame might be.
I'm all ears.
Well, he doesn't hold back. He claims that Putin is obsessed with power.
Right.
With recreating a sphere of influence that echoes the Soviet Union.
It's like he wants to turn back the clock.
Exactly. And he warns that Ukraine is just the beginning.
Oh, wow.
If Putin succeeds there, he won't stop. He'll continue to push to test the limits of the West's resolve.
So it's a pretty bleak outlook.
It is, honestly.
But Zelenskyy also brings up someone who might surprise you.
Oh, really? Who's that?
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Right. These two have history, remember?
Oh, yeah, of course. The impeachment.
Right.
The pressure to investigate Biden.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You'd think there would be some bad blood there.
For sure.
But Zelenskyy seems to believe that Trump might be the key to ending the war.
Really?
He talks about Trump's ability to influence Putin.
Okay.
Even suggesting that Trump could act as a mediator. He seems genuinely convinced that Trump might be the one to get Putin to the negotiating table.
That's a long shot, but I guess when you're facing a war like this, you're willing to consider all options.
Exactly. And then there's the whole issue of corruption.
Oh, yeah.
Which hangs over any discussion of Ukraine.
It's a sensitive topic, for sure.
Right. But it's something we can't ignore.
Absolutely not.
What does Zelenskyy have to say about it?
Well, he's quite candid about it.
Okay.
He acknowledges that corruption has been a problem in Ukraine, but he insists that his administration is making strides to combat it.
In what ways?
He specifically mentions the establishment of a robust anti-corruption system and points to the fact that several oligarchs who once held immense power are now facing justice.
So he's saying that things are changing.
He is. He even calls out Kolomoisky.
Who's that?
He's an oligarch who was once a close ally of Zelensky's, but who's now facing criminal charges.
So no one is above the law.
Exactly. It's a clear message.
Okay. So he's taking steps to address corruption domestically.
Yes.
But what about the allegations regarding the aid that Ukraine has received from the West?
Right. That's a tricky situation. You know, you have a nation fighting for its survival, desperately needing every resource it can get. But then there's the concern that some of that aid might not be used as intended.
How does Zelenskyy respond to those concerns?
Well, he argues that a large portion of the aid has been in the form of weapons, not cash.
Okay.
Which makes it more difficult to misuse.
That makes sense.
He also emphasizes the importance of focusing on the distribution side of things, suggesting that any corruption might be happening further down the chain.
So he's basically saying, look, we're doing everything we can to ensure the aid is being used properly.
Yeah.
But you also have to look at where it's going after it leaves our hands.
Exactly.
Okay. And are there any specific people he addresses regarding these corruption concerns?
Yeah. He specifically mentions Elon Musk and Donald Trump.
Really?
Both of whom have voiced skepticism about corruption in Ukraine.
Okay.
He assures them that his administration is vigilant, that they're doing everything they can to prevent any misuse of funds.
I see.
He even makes a pretty bold statement.
What's that? Claiming
that Ukrainian soldiers would kill such people with their own hands if they found anyone stealing weapons.
That's a pretty strong message.
It is. He's basically saying that corruption is a matter of national security.
Right.
And they're taking it extremely seriously.
It's a reminder of just how high the stakes are in this conflict.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every dollar, every weapon could make the difference between victory and defeat.
And speaking of unlikely allies, we can't ignore the role that Elon Musk has played in this war.
Oh, yeah.
His Starlink satellite internet system has been absolutely vital for keeping Ukraine connected.
It really has. It's been incredible to see.
Yeah, it is. Like something out of a movie. You have this tech CEO suddenly thrust into the middle of a global conflict.
It's wild.
What does Zelenskyy have to say about Musk and Starlink?
Well, he talks about his direct conversations with Musk.
Oh, wow.
About how they worked together to get Starlink up and running in the early days of the invasion.
I see.
He even invited Musk to visit Ukraine.
I wonder how that visit went, if it ever happened.
Oh, too.
But let's shift gears a bit and talk about Zelensky's vision for the future.
Okay.
It's incredible that he's even able to think about rebuilding and reshaping Ukraine while all this is going on.
It is.
What does he see for the future of his country?
Well, he sees a future where Ukraine is not just a victim of war, but a thriving democracy.
Okay.
A hub for technology and innovation.
I like it.
A nation deeply integrated with Europe.
So he's not giving up.
No, not at all. He's a big believer in the power of digitalization.
Okay.
He specifically mentions the Daya platform.
What's that?
It's this incredibly successful online system for accessing government services.
Oh, interesting. So like a one-stop shop for everything.
Exactly. Think of it like a digital government in your pocket.
I like that.
It allows Ukrainians to access a wide range of government services.
Right.
Everything from applying for permits to starting a business.
Wow.
It streamlines bureaucracy, reduces opportunities for corruption, and makes Ukraine more attractive to investors.
So he's using technology to build a better future.
Absolutely.
Please.
He sees Daya as a model for the future.
That's great.
He also talks about things like tax reform, attracting foreign investment, and diversifying Ukraine's economy.
It's a pretty ambitious agenda.
It is, especially considering the current circumstances.
But is it realistic?
It's a huge challenge, no doubt.
Yeah.
But what's striking is Zelensky's optimism.
Right.
He believes in the potential of the Ukrainian people, in their ability to rebuild and innovate.
It's inspiring.
He even suggests that Ukraine could become a global leader in green energy.
Oh, wow.
Leveraging their natural resources to create a more sustainable future.
That's a bold vision.
It is. It's almost like he's saying, look, we're not just fighting for our survival.
Right.
We're fighting for a better future, for a Ukraine that is modern, prosperous, and a leader on the world stage.
I love that. It's a powerful message.
It is. And it speaks to his belief in the resilience and ingenuity of the Ukrainian people.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about war leadership, Putin, Trump, even Elon Musk.
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind.
It has. But there's one more thing I want to touch on before we move on.
Okay, what's that?
Zelenskyy brings up a really thought-provoking point about the possibility of reconciliation between Ukraine and Russia.
Interesting.
Something's going to have to be addressed at some point.
Oh, absolutely.
But he has a very specific condition for true healing to take place.
Okay. What's that?
He believes that Russia needs to apologize.
I see. He sees an apology as a fundamental step for acknowledging the pain and suffering that this war has caused.
Yeah.
For taking responsibility for their actions.
It's about more than just saying sorry.
Right.
It's about acknowledging guilt.
Exactly.
About demonstrating a genuine commitment to making amends.
He even draws a parallel to Germany's post-World War II reconciliation process.
Oh, interesting.
He argues that Germany's willingness to accept responsibility for the horrors of the Nazi regime was essential for their reintegration into the global community. He sees it as a model for how nations can move forward after a period of intense conflict and atrocity.
It makes sense.
But it raises a really complex question.
What's that?
Can true forgiveness and reconciliation happen without an apology?
That's a tough one.
Right? Can you truly move on without acknowledging the wrongs that have been committed?
Those are questions that I think we need to keep grappling with as we think about the long-term consequences of this war.
And the possibility of a lasting peace between Ukraine and Russia.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for now.
Okay.
But don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll delve deeper into Zelensky's personal experiences, the complexities of corruption, and his vision for a digitally transformed Ukraine.
Sounds good. Welcome back to our deep dive into Lex Fridman's interview with President Zelenskyy.
So, we've talked about a lot.
Yeah, we have.
Zelensky's use of language as resistance.
Right.
His efforts to secure security guarantees for Ukraine. But I want to circle back to the allegations of corruption.
Yeah.
It's kind of the elephant in the room, isn't it?
It's unavoidable, especially when we're talking about a country receiving billions of dollars in aid.
Right, exactly. So how did Zelenskyy address those concerns?
Well, what I found interesting was that he tackled them head on. You know, he didn't shy away from the topic at all.
It seemed like he was trying to get out ahead of it.
Yeah.
He acknowledged that corruption has been a historical problem in Ukraine, but he emphasized the steps his administration is taking to combat it.
He specifically points to the creation of this anti-corruption infrastructure, which he describes as being very sophisticated. He also highlights the fact that several oligarchs, who were once basically untouchable, are now facing legal consequences.
He even names Kolomoisky,
yeah,
who was once considered a close ally of Zelensky,
right,
but who's now facing some serious legal trouble, both in Ukraine and the U.S.
It's a pretty strong signal that he's willing to go after powerful figures.
Yeah.
Even if it means ruffling some feathers.
It definitely sends a message that he's serious about tackling corruption.
Yeah.
Even if it means going after people who were once part of his inner circle.
Totally. But you know what really resonated with me was his response to the broader perception of corruption, especially when it comes to the aid Ukraine has received from the West.
I mean, let's be real. That's a lot of money flowing into a country that's in the middle of a war.
Yeah.
There are bound to be concerns about how it's being used.
Exactly.
Right.
And Zelenskyy makes this very nuanced point.
Okay.
He argues that a significant portion of that aid has come in the form of weapons, not cash.
Okay.
And weapons are harder to misuse or divert for personal gain.
Right. So he's saying it's not like they're just getting suitcases full of cash.
Exactly.
Okay.
And he also suggests that if there is corruption related to the aid, the focus should be on those involved in the distribution, not just assuming that Ukraine is misusing the assistance it receives.
So you have to look at the whole supply chain.
Exactly.
Okay.
Not just the end recipient.
Yeah, that's fair.
And he acknowledges that perceptions matter.
Yeah.
He knows that even a hint of corruption could erode international support for Ukraine.
Of course, which is something they can't afford right now.
Exactly. So he's trying to be very proactive about addressing those concerns.
Okay. So how does he address those concerns, especially among figures like Elon Musk and Donald Trump, who've both expressed skepticism about corruption in Ukraine?
Well, he directly addresses them.
Okay.
He assures them that his administration is vigilant, that they have systems in place to prevent misuse of funds.
Okay.
He even makes a very strong statement.
What does he say?
Claiming that if any Ukrainian soldiers were caught stealing weapons, they would be killed without any trial.
Wow, that's intense.
It is. He's definitely sending a clear message.
Yeah, that corruption will not be tolerated, especially during wartime.
It underscores the seriousness of the situation.
Absolutely.
And the level of accountability he's demanding.
Every resource is crucial.
Exactly.
And he's not going to let anyone jeopardize that.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about corruption.
Yeah.
But I want to shift gears and talk about another fascinating aspect of this conflict.
Oh.
The role of Elon Musk.
Oh, yeah.
It's not every day you see a tech CEO become a key player in a war.
It's almost surreal.
It is.
You have this billionaire entrepreneur who's sending rockets into space.
Yeah.
And also providing critical internet access to a war-torn country.
It highlights these unexpected ways in which technology and geopolitics are colliding.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
And Zelenskyy seems genuinely grateful for Musk's support.
He does.
He specifically mentions the Starlink satellite internet system.
Right.
Which has been so vital for keeping Ukraine connected.
Especially after Russian attacks on their infrastructure.
Imagine being in the middle of a war and suddenly losing access to the internet.
It would be devastating.
It would.
Starlink has allowed Ukrainians to communicate.
Yeah.
To stay informed, to coordinate their resistance.
It's a lifeline.
Totally.
And Zelenskyy even reveals that he personally spoke with Musk early in the war.
Really?
And invited him to visit Ukraine.
Wow. So you have this unlikely partnership between a wartime president and a tech visionary.
It's like something out of a movie.
I know. What was it like for them to talk?
Right.
How did this partnership come about?
It's a story that deserves its own deep dive.
Absolutely.
But for now, let's focus on Zelenskyy's vision for the future. Amidst all the chaos and destruction.
Right.
He still manages to articulate this hopeful vision for a rebuilt and revitalized Ukraine.
It's remarkable, isn't it?
It is. You'd think his focus would be entirely on the immediate crisis.
Right.
But he's already looking ahead, thinking about how to create a stronger, more resilient Ukraine.
He talks about a future where Ukraine isn't just a recipient of aid, but a thriving democracy, a hub for technology and innovation, a nation deeply integrated with Europe.
He seems determined to turn this tragedy into an opportunity for transformation.
Absolutely.
And he specifically highlights the power of digitalization.
Yes.
Citing the success of their Dia platform as a model for the future.
Dia is incredible.
Can you explain what makes Dia so unique?
Think of it as a digital government in your pocket. It's an online platform that allows Ukrainians to access a wide range of government services.
Okay.
Everything from applying for documents to starting a business.
It streamlines bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Reduces opportunities for corruption.
It does.
Makes Ukraine more attractive to investors.
Exactly.
So he's using technology to build a better future.
Absolutely.
Well,
he sees DIA as a model for other countries to follow.
That's amazing.
He also talks about tax reform, attracting foreign investment, diversifying Ukraine's economy.
It's a pretty ambitious agenda.
It's a monumental task, no doubt.
For sure.
Yeah.
But what strikes me is his optimism.
Yeah.
He believes in the potential of the Ukrainian people.
He does.
And their ability to rebuild and innovate.
He even suggests that Ukraine could become a global leader in green energy.
Wow.
Leveraging their resources to create a more sustainable future.
That's incredible.
It's almost like he's saying, look, we're not just fighting for our survival.
Right.
We're fighting for a better future.
Yeah.
For a Ukraine that is modern, prosperous, and a leader on the world stage.
That's a powerful message.
It is. It speaks to his belief in the resilience and ingenuity of the Ukrainian people.
But it also highlights the immense challenges they face.
Of course. Rebuilding a nation after a war of this scale requires massive resources,
Right.
international support, a sustained commitment to reform.
It's going to be a long and difficult road.
It will. But Zelenskyy seems determined to lead Ukraine toward that brighter future.
And speaking of long-term implications,
Yes.
there's one more point I want to touch on before we move on.
Okay, let's hear it.
Zelenskyy raises this question of reconciliation between Ukraine and Russia.
Right.
It's something that's going to have to be addressed at some point.
It is.
But he has a very specific condition for true healing to take place.
What's that?
He believes that Russia needs to apologize.
An apology.
Yeah. He sees it as this fundamental step for acknowledging the pain and suffering that this war has caused, for taking responsibility for their actions.
It's not just about saying sorry.
Right.
It's about acknowledging guilt.
It's demonstrating a genuine commitment to making amends.
He even draws a parallel to Germany's post-World War II reconciliation process.
Oh, interesting.
He argues that Germany's willingness to accept responsibility for the horrors of the Nazi regime was essential for their reintegration into the global community. He sees it as a model for how nations can move forward after a period of intense conflict and atrocity.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But it raises this really complex question.
Yeah.
Can true forgiveness and reconciliation happen without an apology?
That's a tough one.
Can you truly move on without acknowledging the wrongs that have been committed?
That's a conversation we need to have as we think about the long-term consequences of this war.
Absolutely.
And the possibility of a lasting peace between Ukraine and Russia.
It's a reminder that healing the wounds of war takes time.
For sure.
And it requires a commitment to justice, accountability, and a genuine desire for reconciliation on both sides.
Absolutely. And while we can't predict the future,
I think Zelensky's emphasis on the importance of an apology highlights the deep emotional and psychological scars that this war has left on the Ukrainian people.
It's a reminder that beyond all the geopolitical calculations and strategic considerations, there are real human beings who've suffered immensely.
Absolutely.
And their voices need to be heard as we navigate the path toward peace.
And their stories deserve to be told. Speaking of which, in our final segment, we'll delve deeper into Zelensky's personal experiences during the war.
Okay.
The sacrifices he's made and the toll this conflict has taken on him as a leader and as a human being.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It feels like we've covered so much ground in our exploration of Lex Fridman's interview with President Zelenskyy.
We really have.
From the power of language to his vision for digitally transformed Ukraine. We talked about the corruption allegations, the unlikely alliance with Elon Musk, and even Trump's potential role in all this.
It's wild, right?
It is.
Yeah.
But amidst all that, I think it's important to remember that we're talking about a human being here.
Yeah.
Someone who's facing incredible pressure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Zelensky's not just a president.
Right.
He's a husband, a father, a person thrust into a role he never imagined he'd have to play.
And he's very open about the personal sacrifices he's had to make.
He is. Remember when he talks about the morning of the invasion?
Oh, yeah.
That moment he realized he had to shift from being a father to his children to becoming the father of a nation.
It's a powerful statement.
It is. It highlights the immense weight of responsibility he carries, the sudden realization that his personal life is completely intertwined with the fate of his country.
And those sacrifices extend beyond just his family.
Right.
He talks about how this war has forced him to restrict certain freedoms in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Which is a decision that clearly weighs heavily on him.
He acknowledges that tension between fighting for freedom while simultaneously having to curtail certain liberties in the name of security.
It's a dilemma so many wartime leaders face.
Yeah.
And it's one Zelenskyy doesn't shy away from.
Not at all.
It makes you realize that leadership isn't just about making grand pronouncements and giving speeches.
Right.
It's about making these incredibly difficult choices,
Yeah.
often with imperfect information and no guarantee of success.
And those choices have consequences.
Of course.
Both personal and societal. Zelenskyy seems acutely aware of that burden.
He does. You can really sense the toll it's taking on him.
You can. It's a reminder that behind the headlines, the political maneuvering,
right,
there are real people grappling with the very human cost of war.
And speaking of unexpected twists,
yeah,
I'm still thinking about Zelensky's perspective on Donald Trump's potential role in this conflict.
Oh my gosh, I know. It's almost surreal given their history.
Right. This is the same Donald Trump who was impeached for pressuring Zelenskyy to investigate Biden.
Exactly. And yet, Zelenskyy seems to genuinely believe that Trump could play a role in bringing this war to an end.
He even expresses hope that Trump might be the first world leader to visit Ukraine after the war.
It's fascinating. It's like he's willing to set aside past grievances to explore any avenue that might lead to peace.
Yeah.
Even if it means engaging with someone as unpredictable as Donald Trump.
Right. It makes you wonder what his calculations are.
Yeah.
Is this a genuine belief in Trump's ability to influence Putin?
Right.
Or is it a strategic move to try and maintain American support?
It's hard to say for sure, but it adds another layer of complexity to this whole situation.
It does. It also highlights the crucial role that the United States continues to play in this conflict.
Absolutely.
But I think as we wrap up our deep dive, it's worth emphasizing Zelensky's commitment to leading Ukraine toward a brighter future.
He's incredibly resilient.
He is. Despite all the challenges he faces, he refuses to give up hope.
It's inspiring.
He talks about a future where Ukraine is not just a recipient of aid, but a thriving democracy.
A hub for technology and innovation.
Yeah, a nation fully integrated with Europe.
He really believes in Ukraine's potential.
He does. And he envisions Ukraine becoming a global leader in green energy.
Wow.
Leveraging their resources to create a more sustainable world.
That's a bold vision.
It is. It's almost like he's saying, look, we're not just fighting for our survival. We're fighting for a better future, for a Ukraine that is modern, prosperous, and a leader on the world stage.
That's a powerful message.
It is. It speaks to his unwavering belief in the Ukrainian people.
It does. I think Zelensky's story is one of resilience, hope, and the power of the human spirit to overcome even the most daunting challenges.
Well said. I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive into Lex Fridman's interview with President Zelenskyy.
I agree. It's been an incredibly insightful conversation.
It has. I've learned so much about the complexities of this conflict.
Me too.
About the challenges of leadership and about the enduring power of hope in the face of adversity.
And for our listeners, if you want to learn more about Zelensky's thoughts and experiences, I highly encourage you to listen to the full interview yourself.
It's well worth the time. And with that, we'll say goodbye for now. But we'll be back soon with another deep dive into a topic that's shaping our world.
Until then, stay curious and keep exploring.